She left the chapel before the vows could bind her, veil trailing through the morning mist, shoes still white, heart unspoken. By the time they found the note on the table, the candles had burned to nothing. It said only, "Find the well. Subscribe before start the story." In the quiet countryside of Vermont, the Caldwell estate stood wrapped in ivy and secrets. Eleanor Caldwell, poised, soft-spoken, 26, was meant to marry a man her family adored, but her heart could not follow. Her disappearance from the wedding left both scandal and silence behind. What remained was a letter on the oak dining table, written in a trembling hand, that would pull her mother, her brother, and the groom into a web of buried truth and old grief. The sun hadn't fully climbed that morning. Mist lingered over the north field, settling in the long, wet grass like a memory you couldn't shake. I walked slowly along the dirt path behind the stables, boots sinking into the damp earth, when I saw it, a white smear against the green Eleanor's veil. It was caught on the top rail of the old fence, frayed at the edges, swinging gently in the wind. The fabric trembled like it was still alive. I bent down, running my fingers over it, and the dampness soaked through my sleeves. It smelled faintly of her perfume, the one she always wore when she thought no one was looking. I couldn't speak. Not yet. The footprints leading away from the fence were small. Barely there, but enough to follow. They wandered toward the edge of the woods, where the trees huddled close like they were keeping secrets. I hesitated at the line where field met shadow. The ground smelled of rain and soil, of things buried and forgotten. Somewhere far off, a rooster crowed, sharp and lonely, and it echoed like a warning. Margaret was waiting in the kitchen. Her hands gripped a cup of tea so tightly the porcelain rattled against the saucer. She didn't look up when I brought the veil in, only pressed it to her chest. She was frightened, she whispered. Not defiant. She wouldn't leave like this if it wasn't fear. Her voice cracked, soft and uncertain. I wanted to tell her I didn't know, but I couldn't. The silence in that room was heavier than any explanation. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows. Daniel, her fiancé, stood near the doorway. He said nothing. His shoulders were stiff, arms crossed, jaw tight. He looked at the veil like it was some evidence from a crime scene, not the remnant of a person he was supposed to marry. The letter was still on the oak table, neat, trembling, and unread by anyone brave enough to pick it up. I glanced at it. The paper was simple. The handwriting almost childish, the words folded carefully in a way that made the heart ache. Find the well. Nothing else. The field smelled of wet earth and hay. I walked there with Margaret later, barefoot despite the chill in the morning air. Each step pressed the dew into my skin, soaking my socks, and I didn't care. The veil was folded carefully in my hands. She had left it like a breadcrumb, or a clue, and it hurt in ways words never could. We followed the footprints again. They ended where the grass grew taller, near the edge of the woods. The fence post had tiny scratches, maybe from her fingers, maybe not. I imagined her hands, pale against the wood, trembling in the cold, still gripping the fabric she'd worn to promise her life to someone she didn't love. Margaret shivered, and I saw the weight of every wedding dress she'd ever held for her daughters, the dresses that were supposed to be about joy, not running or fear. Her eyes didn't leave the veil. She wouldn't do this to spite anyone, she said softly. She couldn't. Daniel finally spoke, but only to ask if she had left anything else behind. He didn't ask about the footprints, didn't ask about the veil, didn't ask about the note. His voice was quiet, too quiet, like he was measuring himself against some invisible truth he didn't want to face. I didn't answer. The veil was heavier than I expected. It carried more than fabric, It carried the morning, the rain, the sound of her leaving without a word. I held it to my chest, like Margaret, and felt her absence in every shiver of the cloth. The field stretched on, endless and damp. Birds stirred in the trees, startled by our presence. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and frost. I could almost hear her voice there, soft, uncertain, calling to no one in particular. Or maybe it was just the wind. I remembered the letter again. Find the well. What well? I had no memory of any well in the back fields, or at least not one that mattered. And yet, the words stuck. Eleanor hadn't written them lightly. Whoever read them would have to search. Whoever read them would have to see what she saw. Margaret's fingers twitched around the veil. Maybe it's a game, she whispered. But I didn't believe her. Not entirely. Eleanor had never played games. And she hadn't left her wedding in silence for nothing. Daniel stepped closer to the edge of the trees, finally moving, but I could tell he was reluctant. He scanned the grass, the fence, the empty field, and I saw that he was trying to read the story without touching it. But the story had already moved on. It was out there, somewhere, running through footprints, mist, and time. I wanted to follow her. I wanted to know where she had gone. But I stayed with Margaret, watching her fingers tighten around the veil, watching her chest rise and fall with each shallow breath. She was mothering both of us at once, the bride we had lost, and the woman still standing in front of us, broken in quiet ways. I walked the fence again. The veil caught in the wood like a spider web, waiting. I ran my fingers over the thin fabric, imagining the texture of her hands, the warmth she had pressed into it in the night. There was a faint scratch where the wind had tugged, a small tear near the corner. She had left something of herself in it, a fragment. Footprints beyond the fence disappeared into shadow. The ground was disturbed, soft and damp. The moss along the trees pressed under my shoes, leaving prints I knew she had never made. I closed my eyes and pictured her moving between the light and dark, her breath cold in the mist, her heart faster than it should have been. Why the well? I didn't know. But I would find it. By noon, the mist had burned off, leaving a pale sun and wet grass. The veil hung on my arm like a ghost I couldn't let go. Margaret and I returned to the house. The letter sat on the table, waiting to be read. Daniel lingered near the doorway, restless, silent. I placed the veil on the table beside the note. They didn't touch it. None of us did. It was hers, and hers alone, until she returned. The field behind the house swayed in the wind. The sun caught the wet blades of grass, making them glimmer faintly. Somewhere, hidden under shadows and leaves, the footprints waited. And the veil waited, too. We didn't know yet what she wanted us to find. But we would. And the silence stretched long, waiting for her to speak again. The letter sat on the oak table like it had been waiting for someone brave enough to touch it. The morning sun slipped through the curtains, dust motes drifting like tiny stars in the quiet kitchen. I reached out slowly, my fingers hovering over the paper as if it might vanish if I touched it too soon. Margaret was across the room, her hands wrapped around her teacup. She didn't speak. She hadn't for hours. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock, each second sharper than the one before. The house felt hollow, stretched thin between what had happened and what we still didn't know. I unfolded the letter carefully. The paper smelled faintly of candle wax and old ink, a mixture that felt like memory itself. Eleanor's handwriting was small, neat, but trembling in places, as if her hand had been unsteady when she wrote it. The words were simple. Find the well before he does. No signature. No explanation. Just those 6 words. I held the letter closer, squinting at the faint lines where the ink had smudged. Perhaps it was her tears. Perhaps it had been the damp morning air from the north field. My throat tightened. Every instinct in me screamed to run after her, to follow the footprints in the mist, to demand answers that wouldn't come. Margaret finally came over. She didn't look at the note at first. She only touched my arm, her hand warm but trembling. She wouldn't lie, she said softly. She wouldn't play a trick like this. Not to us. Her eyes glistened. Something's wrong, something she can't tell us. I nodded, but it wasn't reassurance. It was agreement with a fear I couldn't speak aloud. Daniel lingered near the doorway. His gaze flicked between the letter and Margaret, then to me, but he said nothing. He never did. Not the type to argue, not the type to comfort. He waited for us to make sense of it, or maybe he waited for the letter to do it for him. I thought about Eleanor. About the morning mist and the veil snagged on the fence. About the small footprints disappearing into the trees. About how she had left a word instead of a voice. Before he does. Who was he and why did she sound so afraid? Margaret picked up the letter carefully, reading the words aloud in a soft, trembling voice. Find, the, well. Each syllable lingered, stretching the space between us. The letters seemed almost alive, whispering across the wooden table. She paused, her fingers tracing the edges of the paper. This handwriting. I know it. I watched her closely. You do? I asked. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. It's hers. From when she was younger. From her journals, when she used to write to herself. It's her hand. I swallowed hard. That tiny confirmation made the room heavier. If Eleanor had written this, it meant she had planned it. She had thought it through. She had known someone would read it, and she had trusted no one but herself to decide what to leave behind. The kitchen smelled faintly of rain from the open window, mixed with the faint aroma of the burnt toast from breakfast, still sitting on the plate. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters, dragging shadows across the floor like long, silent fingers. The letter seemed to hum in the quiet, like it was waiting for us to act. Daniel finally broke the silence, voice low, controlled. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe she's upset. She's young, hormones, stress. He trailed off, letting the words hang. I saw Margaret's jaw tighten. I saw his hand clench into a fist. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I held the letter as if it were a fragile bird, knowing that the wrong word could send everything crashing. I remembered the footprints in the north field, the damp grass, the veil tangled on the fence. Everything Eleanor had left behind led to a question. The well. It wasn't just a well. It was a place, a memory, a warning. Something she needed us to see. Something she couldn't speak aloud. Margaret, finally, set the letter down. Her hands shook slightly, leaving small impressions on the paper. We have to go there, she said. The voice was firm but quiet, like a decision she had been afraid to make until now. Daniel exhaled sharply. The well, you mean, the old one near the orchard? His voice hitched slightly, betraying fear he tried to hide. He looked toward the back of the house, toward the tree line where shadows pressed close together. I could see it in his eyes. He knew more than he admitted. Margaret didn't answer him. She only reached for my hand and squeezed it. The warmth was comforting, but the silence between us stretched like a rope over a deep pit. We didn't need words. The letter had already spoken. Later, I traced the ink again, imagining Eleanor's fingers pressing into the paper, her hand quivering. Each letter was deliberate. Each smudge a mark of urgency. I wondered if she had thought about us finding it. I wondered if she had imagined our fear, our worry, the way we would look at each other across the kitchen table, trying to make sense of a single, trembling line of text. Margaret finally spoke, voice softer now. She wants us to follow her. Her eyes lingered on the letter. She's asking us to trust her. Even now. I nodded. I understood. But the question remained, who was he outside? The wind picked up. The house creaked like it remembered her footsteps. I could almost hear her voice, soft and distant, calling from somewhere I couldn't see. The letter was a map. A key. A plea. And it demanded we move before it was too late. By evening, the kitchen was quiet again. The sun had dipped low, streaking the room with gold and grey. The letter lay on the table, corners curled, edges damp from where Margaret's hands had pressed. We didn't touch it again. We just stared at it. I pictured Eleanor somewhere beyond the trees, beyond the shadows, waiting. Waiting for us to understand. Waiting for us to follow. And I knew, deep down, that the well wasn't just a place. It was the beginning. I didn't notice the room at first. I had passed it countless times, a door half hidden at the end of the hallway. But that evening, something about the light caught my eye, the way the sun slanted through the dusty curtains, painting rectangles on the floor like they were waiting for someone. I pushed the door open. The hinges groaned softly, almost apologetically, and the air inside smelled of lavender and old wood. Eleanor had spent hours here, writing in journals, folding letters, hiding things she didn't want anyone to find. But now, it was empty. The bed untouched, the desk bare, a single chair angled toward the window. The quiet pressed against my chest. Margaret stepped behind me, whispering, "She was here, not long ago. I can feel it." She reached for the desk, fingers brushing over the smooth surface. Dust shifted under her touch, little clouds rising and falling. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. The room was speaking in silence. I walked toward the window. The orchard beyond was muted in late afternoon light, shadows stretched and long. Every tree seemed to lean closer, as if to eavesdrop. I imagined Eleanor here, her pen scratching across paper, the sound swallowed by the walls. I could almost hear her sigh, soft and unpracticed, like someone holding a secret too heavy for their own chest. Margaret pulled open the small drawer in the desk. It was empty. Nothing but a scrap of torn paper, curled at the edges. I picked it up carefully. Faint pencil marks scrawled across it, almost illegible. The path begins where light falls longest. She had left instructions again, hidden in plain sight. I traced the words with my finger, thinking of the footprints in the damp field, of the veil snagged on the fence, of the letter on the table. Everything Eleanor left behind was a breadcrumb, and I was beginning to follow the trail. Daniel lingered near the doorway, hands shoved into his pockets. I could feel his tension before I heard his words. "She couldn't just leave like this," he said. His voice was low, restrained, but a tremor ran beneath it. He looked around the room as if she might appear in the corner, whispering an explanation we weren't ready for. "She did," I said quietly, voice almost swallowed by the floorboards. "She left us pieces. All we have to do is find them." He shook his head, leaning against the wall. "Pieces, or puzzles, I don't know if I can trust this." Margaret's hand found mine again. "Trust her," she said. "Even if it hurts." The sunlight shifted, drawing long, golden stripes across the floor. I knelt by the window and pressed my palm to the sill, feeling the faint warmth that lingered from hours past. Eleanor had leaned here. Had looked out over the orchard. Had made decisions we would never understand fully, but that demanded our attention. I imagined her footsteps leaving the room, trailing down the hallway, through the kitchen, and into the misty field beyond. I imagined her stopping at the edge of the woods, her veil fluttering in the damp morning air. My chest tightened. Every moment she had been gone, she had left signals, hints, small fragments of herself, waiting for us to catch up. Margaret finally spoke again, breaking the silence that had become almost unbearable. Look. She pointed to a small, narrow crack beneath the wardrobe. Dust and cobwebs gathered there. She always had a hiding spot. Maybe. I knelt, reaching into the darkness. Fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. I pulled it out slowly. A small, brass key. Simple, unadorned, yet heavy in my hand. I turned it over. No inscription. No mark. Just weight. Significance. Daniel's eyes widened. A key, he whispered. To what? I shook my head, knowing the answer was already written in every step we had followed so far. It was hers. It was hers alone. And it was meant for the well. The room itself seemed to sigh as I replaced the key in my pocket. Dust fell from the ceiling corners, and the sunlight shifted again. Shadows moved slowly, almost deliberately, over the floor. I could feel Eleanor's presence in the space, not tangible, not visible, but there, like a pulse beneath the walls. Margaret pressed her hand to her chest. She knew we'd find this. She planned every step. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes were clear. She trusted us to see it through. I nodded, feeling the weight of the letter, the veil, the footprints, and now the key. Each piece fit into a story larger than we understood, and yet it was real, tactile, and urgent. I traced the floorboards with my fingertips as I knelt one last time, feeling the texture of old wood beneath my hand. The chair angled toward the window seemed to hold her shape still, faintly warm, faintly alive. I imagined her seated there for hours, planning, thinking, leaving clues in every corner of the house. Daniel moved closer. We should go, he said, finally. His voice softer now. Before night falls. Before she. He didn't finish. But I knew what he meant. Before the trail grew cold. Before the shadows swallowed the path entirely. Margaret and I exchanged a look. We didn't speak. The room was already speaking. It had always been speaking. And now it was time to follow. I placed one last glance on the empty desk, the barren bed, the chair angled toward the light. The room was empty. And yet, it was full. Full of instructions, warnings, hope, and trust. Eleanor's presence lingered in the dust motes, in the faint scent of lavender, in the sunlight slanting across the floor. The key in my pocket weighed heavier than I expected. Every heartbeat reminded me of her trust, her absence, her silence. I felt a sudden clarity. The well was not just a place. It was the next step. The promise. The test. We left the room quietly, Margaret holding my hand, Daniel trailing behind, hesitant but present. The hallway stretched ahead, shadows long and patient. The house was silent, but not empty. It was listening, waiting, reminding us that Eleanor's story was still unfolding. And somewhere beyond the orchard, beyond the shadows, beyond the comfort of walls and doors, she waited too. We just had to follow. The orchard smelled faintly of wet earth and fading blossoms, the air thick with early evening mist. Every tree was tall and patient, their shadows stretched long across the damp grass. I could see the footprints now, faint, half-washed by rain and dew, leading from the north field toward the older, gnarled trees at the back. Margaret's hand squeezed mine. "She passed here," she whispered, voice almost swallowed by the wind. The orchard seemed to lean closer, as if listening, as if it had seen her leave and was now watching us follow. Daniel lingered behind, scanning the ground, muttering under his breath. "I don't understand why she wouldn't just tell us. Why all of this hiding?" His words sounded small, lost in the space between the trees. I didn't answer. There was no explanation we could grasp yet. All we could do was follow. The footprints led past the younger trees, where the grass was still wet and glimmered in the dim light. I knelt occasionally, brushing mud from the depressions, trying to measure her steps. They were small, hesitant, deliberate. Each one a whisper, a secret, a question. Why here, I wondered. Why now? Margaret walked slowly, as though afraid to disturb the traces left behind. Every so often, she would pause, closing her eyes, letting the wind carry her thoughts. I realized she was trying to remember Eleanor's rhythm, her pace, her presence, trying to step into her shoes without ever meeting her gaze. Daniel lagged behind, hands shoved deep into his pockets. I could hear him muttering again, this time a single word over and over, "Well, well, well." As if saying it aloud might conjure the answer. The orchard changed as we moved deeper. The trees grew older, their branches twisted and reaching like fingers toward the sky. Shadows pooled at the roots, and the ground was soft beneath our feet. The air smelled faintly of moss and something older, something hidden for years. Then I saw it, the veil, snagged on a low branch, fluttering slightly in the breeze. I recognized it immediately, the delicate lace, faintly damp, still carrying the faint scent of Eleanor. It was a signal, a marker she had left behind. Her hands had brushed this branch. Her mind had planned this. She wanted us to notice. Margaret gasped softly. She was afraid," she said, clutching the fabric to her chest. I nodded, though the thought chilled me more than the evening air. Fear and trust tangled together, impossible to separate. We followed the trail of her steps until the orchard ended at a small clearing. The grass was flattened here, as if someone had paused, lingered, debated, or waited. I knelt to inspect the footprints closely. They led to a patch of earth that looked ordinary, except for the subtle indentation, the small, half-hidden depression. Daniel crouched beside me, eyes scanning. "Could this be it?" he whispered. His voice trembled. For the first time, I noticed the fear in him, the same fear Margaret and I had felt for hours, the fear that what we were following might not lead to answers, but to questions we weren't ready to face. I shook my head slowly. "I think, this is where she wanted us to stop." Margaret bent to touch the ground, fingers brushing the damp earth. "It feels different," she murmured. She was here. She waited. She knew we'd come. The wind rustled the trees around us, carrying a faint scent of lavender and something more, something metallic, like a memory we couldn't quite name. I scanned the clearing. There was no well yet, no obvious marker, just grass and roots, the sun fading behind the distant hills. And still, I felt her presence, hovering just beyond sight, guiding us, trusting us, testing us. I remembered the key in my pocket, heavy and significant. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled it out. Its brass surface reflected the last light of the sun, glinting faintly as I turned it over in my hand. I didn't know exactly what it would unlock yet, but I knew it was hers. And I knew the well was near. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Do you really think she wants us to dig it up, he asked, voice low. Or just, find it, I looked at him. She wants us to find it, I said softly. But finding it isn't enough. We have to understand why. Margaret nodded, her gaze distant. She left everything in pieces, she said. Every clue, every mark, it's all part of her story. The shadows lengthened. A soft hush fell over the orchard, broken only by the distant call of a bird or the rustle of leaves. I knelt again, tracing the last footprints with my fingers. They led straight to a mound of earth, nearly hidden by the roots of an old oak. The soil was soft, slightly damp, and faintly disturbed. I could feel Eleanor's presence in that mound, in every step, in every breath of air around it. She had been here. She had paused. She had planned this carefully, leaving only enough for us to follow, never more. Daniel stepped closer. I can see it, he said quietly. His eyes flicked to the mound. But, what now? I closed my eyes, feeling the wind brush across my face. Now, we listen, I said. We let her guide us. Margaret reached out to place her hand over mine. The key felt warm in my palm now, as if it had absorbed some of her determination. We'll find the well, she said softly. We'll see what she wanted us to see. I nodded, swallowing hard. The orchard was silent, but not empty. It was full of anticipation, of trust, of unspoken instructions. Every tree seemed to lean closer, urging us forward, and every shadow seemed to watch. The veil in the branch fluttered one last time before settling still, and I felt Eleanor's presence like a whisper. She had been here, she had led us here, and she would lead us further. The sun finally dipped behind the hills, casting the orchard in pale twilight. We stood together, hesitant but resolute, staring at the mound that marked the next step. My heart thudded with quiet urgency. Every step had led here. Every clue, every breath of wind, every faint footprint had been deliberate. And now, the well awaited. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Not from cold. From expectation. From fear. From trust. From Eleanor. We had followed her footsteps this far. The orchard was watching. And so was she. The clearing felt smaller in the fading light. Shadows stretched across the soft earth, pooling around the roots of the ancient oak. The mound Eleanor had marked seemed almost ordinary at first glance, just a patch of disturbed soil, but I knew better. It hummed with quiet purpose, as if it held a secret she had whispered only to the trees. Margaret knelt beside me, fingers brushing the dirt lightly. She was here, she whispered. I can feel it. Her voice trembled, but there was strength in it too, the same quiet determination Eleanor had always carried. Daniel lingered at the edge of the clearing, hands shoved into his pockets, jaw tight. I still don't understand, he muttered. Why all of this, the footprints, the veil, the key, why make us follow like this? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The well wasn't just a place. It was a test. A story she had built for us, piece by deliberate piece. All we could do was continue, trusting her guidance, trusting the silence she had left behind. I knelt and pressed the key into the soil, feeling its weight against my palm. It felt heavier than before, not just a piece of brass but a symbol, a bridge between Eleanor's absence and the truth she had left for us. The earth beneath my fingers was soft, damp, smelling faintly of rain and something older, something buried. Margaret bent close, whispering, "Do you feel it the way the shadow moves?" I followed her gaze. The well wasn't visible yet, but I sensed it, the hollow, the subtle indentation beneath the roots, the faint darkness that seemed to absorb the last light of day. Daniel stepped closer. "Are we ready for this?" His voice was uncertain, barely audible. I swallowed, tasting the tension in the air. "We have to be," I said softly. "She trusted us to see this through. We can't turn back now." The first brush of fear hit me when I finally knelt beside the shadowed hollow. It was deeper than I expected, almost swallowing the last rays of sunlight. A faint chill rose from it, brushing my fingers as I peered inside. I couldn't see the bottom. Darkness pooled, patient and still. Margaret placed her hand over mine. She wanted us to find this. To stand here, together, at the edge of something she trusted us with. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "Do you understand what that means?" I nodded. The key felt almost alive in my pocket, pulsing with intention. Eleanor had chosen us, carefully. Every step, every clue, every whisper of guidance had been deliberate. The veil, the footprints, the messages hidden in the house, all leading to this moment. Daniel's voice broke the silence again, quieter now, more reflective. "It's bigger than I imagined. I thought it was just a letter, a game, maybe some kind of message. But this feels like her story. Her entire story." I looked at him, then at the hollow. "Yes," I whispered. "And she wants us to see it. To understand it. Not just the surface, but everything beneath it." Margaret nodded. She knelt on the grass, fingers brushing the roots, feeling for any sign of the well. "She trusted us to follow," she said. "Even when it scared us. Even when it seemed impossible. That's how she left herself with us in pieces we can put together, if we dare." I crouched beside the hollow, tracing the edges with my fingers. The soil was damp, heavy, holding its secrets tightly. The shadows seemed to shift slightly, though the air was still. I could almost hear Eleanor's breath here, faint and careful, as if she had paused, waited, and watched us from afar. The key felt warm again, as though it knew it belonged here. I slipped it into my pocket, letting it rest close to my heart. It was the final piece before the well revealed itself fully, the only way to unlock the next step of her story. Margaret stood slowly, brushing dirt from her hands. "We should go carefully," she said, her voice soft but firm. She made sure there would be signs. "We just have to notice them. Follow them. Trust her." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Trust. It was the thread that ran through every clue Eleanor had left behind. The veil in the orchard, the footprints, the key, all woven into a path that demanded our attention and care. Daniel lingered at the edge of the hollow, hands trembling slightly. "Do you think she is still watching?" he asked quietly. His eyes darted around the clearing, half expecting movement, half expecting silence to answer him. I didn't answer. I only felt her presence, gentle and patient, hovering just beyond the hollow, guiding us, waiting. The last light of day faded, leaving the orchard bathed in a quiet twilight. Shadows pooled around the roots of the ancient oak, darkening the hollow and making it impossible to see the bottom. The wind carried a faint scent of lavender and earth, of rain-soaked leaves and something older, something Eleanor had hidden deliberately. Margaret reached out to touch the key in my pocket. "This is hers," she whispered. "She meant for us to hold it here, at the edge, before we see everything." I closed my eyes, imagining her standing at the edge of the hollow, watching us follow, testing our patience, our trust, our courage. She had left herself behind in every step we had taken, but now, the well's shadow demanded something more: attention, presence, belief. Daniel finally crouched beside me. His voice was soft, reflective, almost reverent. Are we ready to look? I nodded. My chest tightened. The hollow seemed to breathe beneath the roots, patient, silent, and waiting. I could feel Eleanor's guidance like a pulse in the air, gentle but insistent. Every step we had taken led to this: the veil, the footprints, the key, the orchard, the shadow. Margaret placed her hand over mine again. Together, she said simply. We go together. The orchard watched. The shadows deepened. And in the hollow, the well waited, patient, quiet, and holding the next piece of Eleanor's story. We stepped closer. And the earth whispered her name. The well's shadow stretched long under the fading twilight, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and something faintly metallic. I knelt at its edge, fingertips brushing the cool stone, feeling the dampness seep through my skin. Margaret stood close, her hand lightly resting on my shoulder, while Daniel lingered just behind, hesitant, uncertain. The silence felt alive, charged, waiting. The letter rested in my pocket, folded several times over, fragile and almost impossibly thin. I hadn't dared to touch it until this moment. The paper carried her scent: faintly lavender, damp grass, and a trace of the candle she always lit before bed. It was hers, unmistakably, yet it was also a puzzle, a whisper, a secret waiting to be revealed. I unfolded the letter slowly, careful not to tear it. The edges crinkled softly, the sound startling in the quiet of the orchard. Margaret leaned closer, her breath shallow. She's here, she whispered, as if reading the words aloud might summon Eleanor back. The first line trembled under my fingers. I could feel her voice in the curves of the letters, gentle, hesitant, and urgent all at once. My heart thudded against my ribs as I read the words aloud, soft and deliberate, letting each syllable settle into the still air. Daniel shifted, watching me carefully. Is this really from her? He asked quietly. His eyes darted toward the hollow of the well, as if expecting it to answer for her. I nodded. Yes, I said softly. Every step, every mark, every footprint, it all leads here. This letter, this is her voice, finally. The words on the page were simple, yet layered with meaning. She wrote about fear and trust, about leaving behind what she could no longer carry alone, about guiding us gently to understand without forcing us. Each line seemed to echo in the orchard, in the shadows, in the soft rustle of leaves above. Margaret's fingers brushed the paper, tracing the handwriting. She trusted us to find this, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Even when she disappeared, even when we thought we'd lost her. She left pieces, so we could follow. I felt the letter warm in my hand, as if it recognized its purpose. Eleanor's words were quiet, deliberate, not frantic or desperate. They were patient. They demanded attention, thought, and care. And they were meant to guide us here, to the edge of the well, to the moment when her story could finally unfold. I read further. She described the well in detail, though without revealing too much. A marker under the old oak, the slight indentation in the earth, the shadow pooling in the fading light. She described the key, too, and how it fit not just into a lock but into understanding, a way to connect the past she carried with the present we lived. Daniel leaned closer, voice trembling slightly. I can't believe, she thought, of all this. How long has she been planning this? Margaret shook her head. Not long, she said. She just knew how to leave enough for us to find, but not too much. Enough for us to feel her, to follow her, and to understand on our own. I nodded, eyes tracing the next line. It spoke of fear, not just hers, but ours. How we might hesitate, might falter, might misread her intentions. And yet, she encouraged us forward, gently, as though every step we took was part of a conversation only she could hear fully. The orchard grew darker around us. The shadows pooled beneath the roots, and the air smelled faintly of wet leaves and distant rain. I could feel Eleanor's presence, delicate but undeniable, hovering in every sound: the rustle of the branches, the sigh of wind, even the subtle creak of the well's edge as I leaned closer. Margaret took a deep breath, eyes closed. "She's not lost," she said softly. "Not really. She left herself in pieces, but she's still here, in the letter, in the footprints, in the veil. In every step we followed." "Daniel didn't he respond?" He only nodded, swallowing hard. The letter trembled slightly in my hands, not from wind, but from the weight of what it carried. I reached the final lines. Eleanor wrote of hope, of trust, of understanding that would only come if we moved slowly, deliberately, and together. She spoke of the well not as an ending, but as a beginning, a place where the truth she had carried alone would finally meet the people she loved. The words made my throat tighten. I folded the letter carefully, pressing it to my chest. It was hers. Entirely hers. And yet, in a way I couldn't explain, it felt like it had always been waiting for me, for us, to find it, to listen, and to follow. Margaret's hand covered mine again. "We have the letter," she whispered. "We know where she wants us. Now we go." I nodded, taking a deep breath, feeling the cool air brush my face. The shadows of the orchard stretched long, the wind rustled softly through the trees, and the hollow of the well waited quietly, patient, as if aware we were finally ready to uncover its secret. Daniel stepped closer. Do you think she wants us to open it now?" he asked softly. His eyes flicked to the hollow, to the edge where shadows pooled. "Yes," I said. "But carefully. Slowly. Just like she wanted." Margaret squeezed my shoulder. "Together," she reminded us. The orchard listened. The well waited. And Eleanor's voice, gentle, careful, patient, lingered in every rustle of leaves, every shadow, every breath we drew. The letter had unfolded, her story had begun to speak. And now it was time for us to follow it further. The evening air had turned cool, carrying the faint scent of damp soil and pine. The orchard behind us seemed quieter now, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. The well lay before us, a dark hollow that swallowed the last light of day. I felt a tug in my chest, anticipation, fear, and the faintest trace of Eleanor's presence. She had led us here, step by careful step, yet the end remained unseen. Margaret crouched beside me, fingers brushing the edge of the well. "She's not just guiding us," she said softly. "She's testing us. Seeing if we'll notice the small things." I nodded, glancing at Daniel. His face was pale in the dim light, jaw tight, eyes darting between the shadows, and the letter still clutched in my hand. I stepped closer to the edge, peering into the darkness. The hollow seemed endless, almost swallowing the faint glimmer of the key I carried. Then I noticed it, a faint outline, almost imperceptible, etched into the stone wall of the well. A narrow ledge, hidden from casual view, stretching along the far side like a quiet promise. "Do you see it?" I whispered, pointing. Margaret leaned closer, squinting. "Yes," she breathed. "She left it for us. The ledge, she wanted us to find it." Carefully, slowly. Daniel shifted uneasily. "It looks dangerous," he murmured. His hand brushed mine, seeking reassurance. I didn't answer. Instead, I focused on the ledge, tracing it with my eyes. It was narrow, uneven, worn by years of rain and roots, yet unmistakably there a secret path she had discovered long ago, a way to reach what she had hidden. I took a slow breath. We have to trust it, I said softly. Trust her. Margaret nodded, eyes bright with determination. Step by step. Together. I lowered myself carefully to the edge, feeling the stone under my fingertips, rough and damp. Each movement had to be deliberate. The hollow seemed to breathe beneath me, patient and still. I glanced at Daniel. His hand trembled as he reached for the stone. I'm ready, he whispered. We moved slowly, the key pressed in my pocket, the letter folded carefully in my hand. The ledge was narrower than I expected, slipping slightly underfoot. The wind whispered through the orchard, rustling the leaves, carrying Eleanor's presence like a quiet reassurance. Margaret went first, steady and calm, moving along the ledge as if it were a familiar path. I followed her, every step measured, careful not to disturb the earth beneath us. Daniel's steps were hesitant, uneven, but we guided him, a hand on his back, a whispered instruction, until he found balance. The ledge wound around the hollow, revealing the well in a new way from above, from the side, from a perspective that made it seem smaller, almost intimate. The darkness seemed less threatening here, more like a waiting presence, aware we were following Eleanor's carefully plotted path. I held the letter against my chest, feeling its warmth, its urgency, its quiet insistence that we move forward. Every sentence she had written now felt alive, guiding my hands, my eyes, my heart. Margaret's fingers brushed mine briefly. She's proud, she whispered. She trusts us. Daniel exhaled slowly, his tension easing slightly. I can see why she left all these clues, he said quietly. It's like, she wanted us to understand her. Not just the fear, but the courage it took to leave. A sudden shift in the stone made me pause, heart thudding. The ledge trembled underfoot, and I pressed myself closer to the wall, careful not to disturb the fragile balance. The shadows pooled beneath us, dark and patient, as if waiting to see if we would falter. Margaret reached out, steadying Daniel. Almost there, she murmured. Her voice carried a calm I envied. It reminded me of Eleanor, quiet, determined, unshakable even in the face of uncertainty. I glanced down. The ledge dipped slightly, then rose toward a small hollow in the stone, a ledge within a ledge, hidden almost completely by shadow. It looked impossible to reach, yet Eleanor's letter had hinted at it, described it carefully in the lines we had read just moments ago. I shifted my weight, inch by careful inch, feeling the stone scrape against my palms, rough and wet. My heart pounded in rhythm with the creaking ledge, echoing softly in the hollow. The letter seemed to pulse against my chest, urging me forward, reminding me that every careful step mattered. Daniel moved beside me, tentative but determined. His fingers brushed mine once, seeking reassurance. We're almost there, I whispered. She wouldn't lead us astray. Margaret's voice floated across the space between us. Look, the hollow. The hidden ledge. She left it for us to find. To understand. Her words made my chest tighten. She had left everything in pieces, yet everything we needed to uncover was here, if we only noticed. The hidden ledge revealed itself slowly, a narrow slice of stone that could support our weight if we trusted it. We moved together, careful, deliberate, feeling the pulse of the orchard, the patient presence of Eleanor, and the weight of the well beneath us. Every step was quiet, measured, a dance with shadows and earth, a conversation with someone who was gone yet somehow near. I pressed the key against the ledge, feeling it settle into a natural groove in the stone. It clicked softly, almost imperceptibly, and a faint shift in the wall hinted at a hidden compartment just beyond the hollow. Margaret gasped quietly. "She left it for us," she whispered. "The next piece. The truth." Daniel's voice trembled. "I never imagined it this way. She made us work for it, but it feels like she's here." We paused, breathing together, feeling the quiet weight of the moment. The orchard stretched around us, dark and patient, and the well's hollow waited below. The hidden ledge had led us here, as Eleanor had intended, a secret path, delicate and deliberate, requiring trust, care, and attention to uncover the truth she had carried alone. I held the key tightly, heart racing, feeling Eleanor's presence guide me toward the next revelation. Margaret and Daniel mirrored my steps, silent but steadfast, as we prepared to open the hidden compartment, the place where her story, carefully layered, would finally speak to us in full. The shadows of the orchard whispered through the trees. The well waited below. And we stepped closer, together, toward the secret she had left behind. The hollow beneath the orchard seemed to hold its breath. Shadows pooled like quiet water, and the scent of damp earth and pine lingered, heavy but not oppressive. I crouched at the edge of the ledge, key in hand, heart thudding with a rhythm I could almost hear in the silence. Margaret hovered beside me, her fingers brushing mine in reassurance, while Daniel stayed slightly behind, wide-eyed, uncertain. The hidden compartment was smaller than I expected, almost imperceptible in the wall of stone. Eleanor's careful description in the letter had been exact, not overly detailed, but precise enough for us to find it if we moved slowly and deliberately. My fingertips traced the rough edges, feeling the groove that would cradle the key. "This is it," I whispered. "She wanted us to find this. She trusted us." Margaret nodded, eyes shining faintly in the dim light. "Step by step," she murmured. "Just like the ledge." I pressed the key gently into the groove, feeling it click softly, almost imperceptibly. The stone beneath my hands shivered, subtle, like it had been waiting decades for this moment. A small panel slid inward, revealing a hollow just large enough to hold a bundle wrapped in cloth, Eleanor's handwriting faintly visible on the edges of the fabric. Daniel's breath caught. She really left it for us," he said, voice trembling. His hand hovered near mine, hesitant to touch the secret we had uncovered together. I nodded, unable to speak. The weight of the moment pressed down, heavy yet intimate. Eleanor had led us here piece by piece, through footprints, veil, and ledge, until this compartment finally allowed her story to meet ours. I lifted the bundle carefully, feeling its softness, the weight of something carefully hidden for years. Margaret placed her hand over mine briefly, a quiet promise that we would honor it, and Daniel's eyes followed every movement as if afraid it might vanish before his gaze could hold it. The cloth rustled softly as I unwrapped it. Inside lay a small collection of letters, sketches, and photographs, fragments of Eleanor's life we had never seen, never known, yet somehow felt familiar. Each piece spoke quietly, like a conversation held only in whispers, in shadows, in moments of patient observation. Margaret exhaled softly. She didn't just hide this. She preserved it, for us to understand. I picked up the first letter. The paper was thin and delicate, edges worn, faintly smelling of candle wax and lavender. The handwriting was unmistakable, Eleanor's, flowing and patient. I read aloud softly, letting her words settle into the orchard's quiet. The letter spoke of fear, yes, but also hope. It detailed why she had left, the moments that had terrified her, the choices that had seemed impossible, and the small acts of courage she had taken along the way. Each line carried subtle instructions, not just for us to find her, but to understand her, to see the threads connecting past and present, fear and love. Daniel's voice broke the silence. She didn't leave us because she hated us. She left us because she trusted us to understand. I nodded, glancing at Margaret. Yes. And now, we can. The sketches revealed even more. Maps of the orchard, notes about the well, markings on stones and trees we hadn't noticed before. Eleanor had planned her disappearance meticulously, yet tenderly leaving breadcrumbs for anyone willing to follow. Margaret held a sketch up to the fading light. Look here, she said softly. The ledge, the well, the hollow, she wanted us to find every detail. Every piece matters. I traced the lines with my fingers, feeling the connection between each mark. It was as if Eleanor had drawn not just a map of the orchard, but a map of her heart, her fears, and her trust in us. We sat in silence, unfolding the photographs carefully. Images of Eleanor smiling quietly, alone in fields we had walked, standing near the well we had just explored, moments captured in light and shadow. Each photo carried an intimacy that words could never fully convey. Daniel swallowed hard. I feel like I'm seeing her again, for the first time. She's been here all along, hasn't she? Margaret's eyes glistened. She has. She needed us to follow her in our own time, to understand her courage and her choices. I held the bundle close, feeling the weight of Eleanor's trust in my hands. It was fragile, delicate, and yet infinitely strong, a testament to the patience and care she had put into leaving it for us. The orchard darkened further, stars beginning to emerge through the branches. The well's hollow seemed quieter now, holding its secret in patient silence. I folded the letters carefully, placing them back in the bundle. We had uncovered a part of Eleanor's story, yet the weight of it lingered, echoing in the soft rustle of leaves and the distant sigh of wind. Margaret rested her hand on my shoulder. We'll carry this carefully, she said softly. Every step she trusted us to take, we'll honor. Daniel nodded, silent, staring at the hidden compartment as if hoping it would speak again. She planned all of this, for us. For understanding. Not for blame. I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension release in my shoulders, though the mystery remained. Eleanor had left her story in pieces, leading us gently to this moment. Now, it was ours to hold, to interpret, and to follow the next path she had quietly prepared. The stars overhead glimmered through the orchard, soft and patient. The hollow of the well waited, quiet and still, and we sat together, three of us bound by the fragile trust of a girl who had vanished but left everything we needed to understand her. The hidden compartment was more than stone and letters. It was Eleanor's voice, her courage, her patience, and her hope. And as we rose slowly, carrying her carefully preserved story, I realized that the journey she had planned for us was only beginning. The orchard breathed softly around us. The hidden compartment had revealed its secret. And Eleanor's story, patient, deliberate, and unyieldingly tender, whispered its invitation for us to follow the next step. The orchard felt different that night, quieter, yet alive with the memory of Eleanor's presence. Shadows stretched across the damp grass, and the faint glow of the moon traced silver patterns on the leaves. We stood near the well, the hidden compartment behind us, letters and sketches wrapped carefully in Margaret's arms. I felt the weight of her trust pressing softly against my chest, a gentle reminder that we were holding more than paper and stone. Margaret's voice was barely above a whisper. We need to read it. All of it. To understand why she left, why she needed us to follow her this far. Daniel nodded, hesitant. I just want to understand her. Not just what she did, but why. I unwrapped the first letter again, letting the soft rustle of the paper break the silence. Eleanor's handwriting curved like a river, flowing patiently across the page. The first truth she revealed was simple, yet it struck like a quiet pulse. She had been afraid, not of leaving us, but of being misunderstood. She says, she needed to disappear so we could see her without the noise, I murmured. My fingers traced the lines, feeling the care she had taken with each word. Not as a mistake, not as a defiance, but as herself. Margaret's eyes glimmered. She trusted us to follow the quiet pieces, and we did. Her hand brushed mine briefly, a shared understanding passing between us. Daniel swallowed hard. I never realized, she had been thinking about us the whole time, even in her fear. The first truth settled over us like the cool night air. Eleanor's absence had never been about leaving, but about creating space for understanding. Each word, each sketch, each careful placement in the hidden compartment had been a gentle invitation to see her fully. I picked up a photograph next, edges frayed, depicting Eleanor standing by the old oak near the north field. Her smile was soft, hesitant, as if she had known the journey we would have to take. She left us pieces to find, yes, I said softly, but each piece carries a lesson. About patience. About trust. About noticing what isn't said. Margaret nodded, clutching the bundle. She needed us to stop rushing. To see her truth slowly, in parts. And now, we're beginning to. Daniel looked down, running his hand over the well's stone edge. I think this first truth changes everything. How we see her, and ourselves. The next letter revealed Eleanor's reflection on fear. She wrote about the moment she decided to leave, the quiet panic, the racing heart, the icy fear that she might never be understood. But she also wrote about hope, about the belief that the people who loved her would eventually follow the clues she had left, patiently, as we were doing now. I felt a lump in my throat. She had trusted us with her deepest fear, yet she had done it gently, carefully, never demanding but always guiding. She knew we'd be scared too, I said quietly, but she left us a way to see her courage. Margaret exhaled, a soft, tremulous breath. It's a mirror, she whispered. Her courage shows us ours. Daniel's hand trembled slightly as he unfolded another sketch. It was of the ledge, the hidden compartment, and the well drawn with notes we hadn't noticed before. A quiet instruction, notice the small details. They lead to understanding. I traced the lines with my fingers. Every mark she made, every hint she left, it wasn't just to test us. It was to teach us the patience to understand someone fully. Margaret's gaze softened. And we've learned it. Slowly, carefully. Just like she wanted. The orchard seemed to hold its breath around us, leaves rustling faintly in agreement, moonlight spilling over the grass like a gentle witness to Eleanor's trust. We sat in silence for a long moment, letting the first truth settle. Eleanor's absence, the hidden compartment, the careful ledge, all of it had been a quiet lesson, a way to reveal who she truly was. Not just the frightened girl who left the wedding, but the thoughtful, courageous, patient woman who had believed in us enough to leave her story in pieces. Daniel finally spoke. I can feel her here, he said softly, eyes wide. Like she's watching, making sure we understand before she lets us go further. I nodded, feeling the same presence, a quiet warmth that didn't push, didn't demand, only waited. She's here in every shadow, every letter, every careful step we've taken. And now we see the first truth. Margaret opened the final letter in the bundle. The words were short, almost a whisper, I trust you to find me in the quiet, To understand without judgment, to follow the steps I leave behind. The next truth waits where the water speaks, where the well reflects more than your face. The orchard seemed to exhale with us. The hidden compartment had offered us the first truth, but Eleanor's voice hinted at more. The next revelation lay ahead, in the space between shadow and light, water and reflection. Daniel's hand found mine again, this time steady. "We can do this," he said softly. "Together." Margaret nodded, eyes shining with quiet conviction. She trusted us with the first truth. And we honored it. "Now, let us see where the next one takes us." I folded the letters carefully, feeling the weight of Eleanor's trust, her patience, and her courage in my hands. The orchard waited, the well reflected faint moonlight, and the next chapter of her story called softly, insistently, like a whisper on the wind. We stood, three of us together, ready to follow the path Eleanor had laid, step by careful step. The first truth had been revealed, and with it came hope, understanding, and the quiet certainty that her story was only just beginning to speak. The orchard was silent, yet alive. The well waited. And we, carrying Eleanor's patient trust, stepped forward toward the next secret she had left for us to uncover. The well looked different under the pale morning light. Mist curled around the stone rim like slow fingers, and the surface of the water shimmered with a soft, silver tremble. I knelt at the edge, feeling the chill rise from the stone through my hands, and for a moment, I thought I could see Eleanor's face floating in the ripple, not a reflection, but a memory. Margaret stayed behind me, quiet, her fingers brushing mine as she steadied herself against the cold. Daniel lingered a step further back, his eyes scanning the surrounding orchard as if expecting the trees to whisper answers. The hidden compartment had given us the first truth, but now the well waited with something heavier, more intimate, the next secret Eleanor had left, silent and deliberate, in the water's mirror. I traced the rim with my fingers, hearing the faint drip of condensation echo like a heartbeat. The letters had guided us here, and the sketches had prepared us. Yet nothing could have prepared me for the sensation of standing at the edge of her quiet revelation, feeling the hush of her presence in every drop of water. Margaret leaned closer. "Look carefully," she whispered. She said, "The water reflects more than just your face." I studied the surface, slow, deliberate. The mist lifted slightly, revealing more than the grey sky above. Faintly, etched in the stone just beneath the waterline, were letters carved long ago but obscured by years of moss and shadow. My breath caught. Eleanor had led us here not to the water itself, but to what the water revealed, a hidden message, almost invisible, waiting for the patient eye. Daniel's hand hovered near mine. It's her handwriting," I nodded slowly, my fingertips skimming the cold stone. "She left something only someone paying attention would notice. Only someone who followed every step with care." The words, once traced, became clear: "Trust the silence. The water will show you what words cannot. Look closely, and you will understand me." I exhaled softly, letting the weight of her message sink in. Eleanor had trusted us to notice subtleties, to see the unspoken, to hold our attention long enough to witness what she wanted revealed. The first truth had been about courage and patience. The second, the reflection in the water, was about perception, about understanding the hidden language of trust and quiet guidance. Margaret rested her hand on my shoulder. "She's teaching us to listen, not just read. To see, not just search." I glanced at Daniel, who was pale but focused. "It's like she's speaking directly to us now, without saying anything at all." We stayed silent, letting the cold mist curl around us. The well was still, the letters hidden beneath the water just visible enough to guide us. Eleanor's next instruction had been patient, subtle, almost imperceptible, but it carried weight heavier than stone. I crouched lower, fingertips brushing the water, feeling its chill seep into my skin. The reflections shifted as I moved, and for a fleeting moment, I could swear I saw more than Eleanor's message, a glimpse of her presence, the gentle tilt of her head, the quiet strength in her stance. She had orchestrated this encounter carefully, leaving room for discovery, for awe, for understanding. Daniel's voice broke the hush. "It's like, the water knows what she wants us to see." Margaret nodded, eyes misty. "And she's waiting. Waiting for us to learn it, to hold it, to carry it forward." I traced the water's surface, letting my hand linger, feeling the cold, the silence, the whisper of trust Eleanor had left behind. She had vanished physically, but her presence was everywhere, in the letters, the sketches, the hidden compartment, and now, in the reflective silence of the well. The next piece was almost imperceptible. Small ripples formed along the edges of the stone, aligning with marks on the letters we had found. Each ripple seemed deliberate, guiding my gaze to a small stone at the base of the well. I bent closer, feeling the damp stone beneath my fingers. Beneath it lay a tiny key, nearly camouflaged, but revealed by our careful attention and Eleanor's patient orchestration. I held it up, the silver glint catching the muted light. "She's given us the next step," I whispered. "Not just a key, but a reminder, that discovery requires patience and attention." Daniel leaned closer, whispering, "It's like she's been here with us all along." Margaret squeezed my hand. "She has. Every step. Every secret. Every reflection. She trusted us to follow." We sat by the well, the key in my hand, letting the moment stretch. The mist curled around our shoulders, and the orchard remained still, as if holding its breath for us, for Eleanor, for the fragile trust she had left. Each chapter of her story was deliberate, never rushed, never forced, always quiet, always patient. I held the letters against my chest, tracing Eleanor's handwriting with my thumb. The reflection in the water had shown us more than words. It had shown us how deeply she had considered every detail, every instruction, every silent message. The first truth had been courage. The second truth, now revealed, was perception, the quiet, deliberate art of noticing what others overlook. Daniel exhaled slowly. "I feel like I understand her in a way I never could before. And I feel connected. Like she's teaching us how to see, really see." Margaret nodded, her gaze soft. "And that's why she left this for us. So we could hold it, carry it, and follow the next step." The orchard darkened slightly as morning edged toward noon. The well's surface shimmered faintly, the mist lifting but the reflection remaining, Eleanor's presence lingering in silvered water. I set the letters carefully beside the well, the key resting on top, a quiet promise to continue her path with care. We rose slowly, three of us together, feeling the weight of trust, patience, and understanding pressing gently against our shoulders. Eleanor had left more than a story, she had left lessons woven into silence, into reflection, into every deliberate step we had taken. The orchard held us for a moment longer, quiet, patient, alive. The well reflected faint light, carrying her voice in ripples, in shadows, in the silver glimmer of water. And as we stepped back from the edge, the next truth awaited us, deeper, quieter, more intimate than anything we had discovered so far. We walked slowly, the key in hand, hearts heavy with awe, carrying the reflection of trust Eleanor had left. The next secret was close, waiting just beyond the light, whispering to us through silence and shadow. The orchard exhaled softly, the well held its secret, and Eleanor's story continued, patient and deliberate, as we followed her quiet, intricate path. The key felt heavy in my hand, though it was small, almost delicate. The orchard had grown quiet around us, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Mist lingered in pockets among the grass, curling along the edges of the old stone well. I knelt beside it, peering into the dark water, half expecting Eleanor's reflection to ripple back at me. But this time, it was empty. Silent. Waiting. Margaret stood behind me, her hands pressed together, the letters clutched against her chest. Daniel hovered a step further back, pale and quiet, eyes fixed on the well as though it might finally speak its secret aloud. And perhaps it did. But not with sound. Not with words. Only with presence. I placed the key gently on the stone edge, feeling the cold seep through my fingers. I knew, somehow, that Eleanor had hidden the last piece of her story here, waiting for us to follow the path she had laid so carefully. Every letter, every sketch, every faint footprint it had led us here. And now, the final truth was within reach. Margaret's voice broke the hush. She trusted us to find it, to understand it. She wouldn't have left it if she didn't believe we could. I nodded, swallowing against the lump in my throat. It's more than just a key or a note. She's left herself here, in patience, in silence, in shadow. Daniel's hand rested briefly on my shoulder. I think she's showing us what love really means. Quiet. Trusting. Patient. Invisible until you notice it. I reached for the key, fitting it carefully into a small, hidden lock at the base of the well. It clicked softly, a delicate sound that carried far more weight than it seemed to deserve. The lid shifted slightly, revealing a small compartment below, faintly illuminated by the morning light filtering through the orchard. Inside, wrapped in soft cloth, were more letters, sketches, and a small, worn journal. I recognized Eleanor's careful handwriting immediately. Every page, every mark, every line was deliberate, and on the first page, she had written, "You've followed the quiet path. You've seen what others miss. Now you may see me." I opened the journal slowly, feeling each word as if it were a breath she had left for us. Eleanor's final secret was not a dramatic revelation, nor a confrontation with fear or betrayal. It was simple. Patient. Intimate. She had left reflections on her love for us, for the life we had shared and the one she needed to live on her own. She wrote about trust, about understanding, about seeing someone without judgment, without fear. Margaret exhaled softly, her eyes glistening. She wanted us to follow, but also, to see her as she really is. I traced the words with my fingers, tears brimming, not for loss but for connection. This is her voice. Not hidden, not silent. But quiet, deliberate. And now, we understand her. Truly. Daniel crouched beside me, reading over my shoulder. It's beautiful. She didn't run from us. She left a path. A way to follow her, not just in the orchard, but in understanding her heart. The orchard seemed to hold its breath with us. Birds perched silently on the branches, watching. Leaves rustled faintly in a soft wind that didn't chill, but carried the weight of Eleanor's presence. She had orchestrated this entire journey with care, leaving patience and trust as her guideposts. I opened the final envelope in the compartment. Inside, a single note, short and precise, the well whispers what words cannot. Listen closely, and you will hear me in every quiet moment. I held it close, feeling the warmth of Eleanor's presence seep into the chill of the morning. The orchard, the mist, the stone well, it all became her language, a quiet dialogue that only those willing to notice could understand. Margaret leaned her head gently against my shoulder. "She's still here, isn't she?" I nodded, smiling softly through the tears. "She never left." "Not really. She's in the quiet. In the trust. In the care we took to follow her path." Daniel finally let out a slow breath. "And the key, it wasn't just for the compartment. It was for us. To unlock understanding. To see her fully." We sat there for a long while, letting the orchard, the mist, and the well hold us in the delicate silence Eleanor had left. Every word, every sketch, every careful step had been a lesson in patience, trust, and observation. The first truth, courage. The second, perception. And now, the final truth, connection. It was not loud. Not dramatic. Not demanding. It was gentle. Invisible to anyone not willing to pay attention. And in that quiet, Eleanor's story reached its conclusion. Not as an ending, but as a full circle revelation, leaving us with understanding, reverence, and awe. I closed the journal, placing it carefully back in the compartment. The letters rested on top, folded neatly, waiting for anyone else patient enough to follow. I pressed the key gently against the stone edge, feeling the finality in its smooth metal. The orchard was still. The well reflected the morning light, silver and soft, like Eleanor's quiet smile. Margaret rose slowly, taking Daniel's hand and then mine. "She gave us everything we needed," she whispered. "And we found it," I said softly. "Every piece. Every step. Every quiet truth she left behind." The orchard seemed to exhale with us, the mist lifting, sunlight spilling across the grass, highlighting the hidden trails Eleanor had left. Her story had been told not in shouts or confrontations, but in whispers, shadows, and reflections. And now, finally, we had heard them all. We stepped away from the well together, carrying her lessons, her patience, and her trust with us. The orchard remained behind, quiet, alive, and full of the echoes of Eleanor's presence. And somewhere, in the reflection of the water, in the hush of the mist, I felt her one last time, patient, deliberate, and fully herself. The well had whispered. And we had listened.